Eric, could you unpack what implicit knowing really is from a cognitive and neuroscientific perspective, and why it matters so much in human decision making and overall well being?
Yeah, sure. So there's different ways that people talk about it. There's sort of like different modes or different ways of knowing and stuff like that. And I think that's a conversation that's just opening up. So like how do indigenous cultures know the world through their ancestors and stuff like that. But typically when I think about implicit knowing, it relates to implicit learning and implicit memory. So there's work from researchers like Paul Reber and there's a whole literature on humans being able to recognize, they're called implicit correlates. So seeing patterns in the world that aren't bubbling up above your threshold of conscious awareness in many cases. But those patterns will lead you to an intuition or a spider sense of like, oh, that's a red flag. I can't say why, but it's a red flag. It's worth, maybe it's not correct because we make mistakes when we're just looking at patterns, but it's definitely something that's worth looking at when one of those red flags come up. We're so good at this as humans, much better than we are at sort of formal logical operations, and the implicit knowing is much faster, so it can be quite useful. I think my favorite example is they do stuff with categorizing snowflakes where they'll have people say, does this snowflake go into category A or category B? And you're like, I don't know. So you take a guess. And then you get feedback based on whether you're correct or not. And then you learn how to sort these snowflakes into the correct categories without even knowing why you're doing it. And then it's professionally valuable for people like they'll go from chicken farm to chicken farm, and their role is called a chicken sexer. And they'll look at your chicks and tell you if it's male or a female. But there's no really strong markings that let you know if it's a male or female. You just learn it from being told if you're correct or incorrect. And these folks get paid quite a bit because of their implicit knowledge about baby chicks. I think it starts to apply to our own health and our own well-being when we talk about how much do we weight scientific studies in the decisions that we make about our own health. And there was a guy, I saw a talk from him when I was an undergrad up in the Chicago area, and he was coming from the University of Wisconsin, where he had just started up an alternative medicine, complementary and alternative medicine program. And somebody asked him in the question and answer session whether they should drink milk. What study says whether or not I should drink milk? And he's like, oh, try drinking some milk and see how it makes you feel. and if it makes you feel really bad, then you shouldn't drink milk. So it's not to say that we shouldn't look at these studies, but those are more useful from a public health perspective when you're talking about the numbers game. When we're talking about ourselves, there's nothing more useful than the self-knowledge that you have, even if it's contradicting some a scientific study. And that's basically when we talk about the ecological fallacy. I see that being committed quite a bit in the public health space, where they'll say something like, you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of getting of having an adverse event from this drug or something like that. The correct way to think about it is in the population, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that anyone will. But when it comes to me or you, we have either a 0% chance or a 100% chance of having an adverse event based on all of our characteristics that have causal connections that would lead to either an adverse event or not. So it becomes a real issue when we start talking about who is going to be predisposed to having like a vaccine adverse event. I think we could go a long way in communicating trust if we did a little bit of screening and embraced what I think 23andMe called personalized medicine. I think the FDA calls it precision medicine now. But if you can say, okay, it looks like you know, this person has an aromatase deficiency or glutathione deficiency, and maybe we know that this sort of person is more likely to have an adverse event. Okay, we screen for that, and then people are going to trust that they're not just going to be this broken egg in this public health omelet that gets made and then like acceptable risk. So I think we could go a long way there, and also how we communicate certainty um, in the health space. There's lots of literature suggesting that if you communicate certain uncertainty in a competent, transparent, um, uh, committed way, people actually trust your messaging more than if you are trying to communicate absolute certainty all the time. And I think we saw that difference when we looked at like how a place like Sweden handled the COVID pandemic. They communicated a lot of uncertainty, but then they were able to get a lot more compliance from their population because everybody knew that the public health folks were doing the best that they could. So I would like to see a lot more uncertainty